Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to go over a quick installation of some rock lights. If you're not sure what rock lights are, they're basically lights that kind of go in the wheel wells or under the Jeep, depending on where you want to put them, to illuminate the ground so you can see rocks and things you're climbing over at night. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay guys, real quick, let's go over what's included when you buy the rock lights. If you get the same rock lights that I got, this is pretty much how they come. You get 4 of these with about 6 inches of wire. You get the rubber grommet that they're used to mount on top of, and then it comes with a few bolts to screw it in. I didn't use those, I just used self-tapping screws, and obviously this is not enough wire. So just the lights, they were around $25. I ended up getting colored lights. I got blue, which you can get whatever color you want, or just go with a white. So you're going to need more wire, so you can also buy a wiring harness. And the wiring harness was also around $25, I think. And that was pretty nice because it gives you the leads to the battery. It gives you a fuse. It has a relay. And then it's got 4 long leads to stretch to each of the rock lights at each wheel well. They're equal length, so the ones at the front I cut short and then wired them together. The ones at the rear are not going to be long enough, but it does also come with 2 long extra lengths of wire. That way you can connect those wires together and make them even longer so you can reach the rear of the Jeep. It also came with a switch, and I'm not going to use that switch. I actually bought this switch, which says rock lights, and it's the same style and will fit in the factory location for the rocker switches. So I just thought that was kind of cool to keep a factory switch in there. And so a total of maybe about $60-ish, and you can do all that. I find it much easier than building your own wiring harness, and yeah, all the wires shielded and everything, so it's in pretty good shape. So this is how I've mounted the front. It's the same on both sides. I put them up here. I made sure that I wasn't going to drill through into anything on the top side, and then I mounted it and ran the wire out of that rubber grommet this direction, because there is a factory pre-drilled hole right here that the wire fits perfectly through. So that seemed great, and this kind of projects the light down and out this way, so it looks pretty good at night. And then from there I ran the wiring harness, one of those longer leads, around. I zip tied it up, routed it down to keep it out of the way. I left myself a little bit of slack, but then I cut off the extra and then put them together. I've got some wire butt connectors in here, and I taped them over to keep them safe. And then the other side I did the exact same way. We'll walk over there real quick. This one was a little more tight of an area to drill through. Just under the fuse box there, you can kind of see that screw, and there's 2 of them. So I actually I used a self-tapper to get through there, a real short one, and then I took my longer screws and I actually cut the self-tapping part off so the screw would be shorter and it was just the threaded section. And then I screwed it up through there, and making sure it wouldn't hit the fuse box, and it didn't. And then I fed it through that same factory drilled hole, which is right there, and then ran it around, brought that wiring harness wire over here, cut it off, left myself an extra foot or so if I ever wanted to move the wire, and then connected it all and tucked it away cleanly. And then next, I still have the battery wires to wire up, but that'll be nice and easy. I'm not doing that until I'm finished. And then this is the relay where every wire comes out of. So I've got the next one run down there, and I'm going to run that along the frame to the rear instead of running them all through the Jeep, which you could do, but that's a lot of wires to stuff through that grommet for the factory wiring harness. Then the next one for the driver's side rear, I've run over here. I've tucked everything away, zip tied it up nice and clean, and I'm running it down through here, and then I will also run that along the frame to the rear. Okay, so the wire for the switch, that actually you want inside the cab, obviously, and this on my TJ, I don't know if it's the same for all of them, but this is the driver's side, the firewall. This is where the factory harness goes through, and it's got a rubber grommet there. I just, to make it real easy, because I've run a wire through the actual hole in the grommet before, and it's just real tight. It's already filled with a bunch of wires. It was really hard to feed that through. I just went ahead and cut a slight hole on the rubber up top and just put it through there. I just poked a hole through with a screwdriver and then fed that wire through. You could also pull the grommet over if you wanted to and get through that way. Sorry, you can get through that way. I was just trying to keep it as watertight as possible, but also not sit out here for an hour trying to feed wire through. And then that comes through. Let me tuck you in here. Sorry about the blue light. That comes through right up there with all the other wires, and then I've fed it through. And I think I'll probably have to extend this a little bit as well, but that's not that big of a deal. Actually, I might not have to, but I'm going to run it over to the rocker switches, and I'm going to add my rocker switch in one of these blanks and wire it up. So this is the driver's side, and I'm going to go underneath. This is where I have dropped that line through that's going to go to the rear, and I plan on just putting it on top or on the inside here of the frame with these other not wires but lines, and I'm just going to run it along there and zip tie it with some black zip ties so it blends, and this should keep it up out of the way and keep it safe from getting caught or torn on anything. And I'm going to run it all the way to the back. So, like I said, this isn't long enough. It's almost long enough, but just not quite. So I'm going to add some wire to it and run it along and zip tie it up. Not the prettiest solution, but it's clean and simple, and I don't think it'll hurt anything, and it should hold it just well. Yeah, so once I add some wire to it, then I'll move to the rear, run the lines, and we can mount the next light back here. Okay guys, so I've got the extra wire and the wire that's already connected to the relay and harness, and I'm just going to start by taking some wire strippers. If you don't have wire strippers, you can just strip the shielding off with a knife. Just be careful not to get the actual copper wire. So stripping that off to expose the wire. And then twist the wire so it kind of braids it. That way you don't have a ton of strands that'll fray in different directions when you're trying to do something. And then we got a packet of butt connectors here. Grab a few of these out. So we've also got some heat shrink here, and just cut off a little section and go ahead and put it over the wires. I'm not sure if it's going to be big enough to go over 2 butt connectors, and if you don't have heat shrink, not a big deal, just use some electrical tape. So then obviously black to black, red to red, so slide in one side of the same color and then put the other of the same color in the other end. Alright, and then once you've got them both in there, crimp the connector. Essentially you're squishing the connector down on the wires to hold the wires together and complete the connection. I don't have a crimper, but usually any pair of wire strippers has a spot to squish a connector. And then I always give it a nice tug after I crimp it to make sure it's going to hold. If you don't have wire strippers to crimp anything with, you can just use a pair of pliers. Heat shrink would have just been a nicer way to do it, but obviously it's not going to fit. And my heat shrink is already stuck on here now, so I'll just go ahead and heat shrink it on that side of the wires. Give you two guesses as to why they call it heat shrink. So that looks much cleaner. You get a watertight seal that way. I should have used a bigger section of heat shrink, but I didn't have any. So anyway, what I'm going to do is just take some electrical tape and tape it up. And there we are. Now we got an extra long section of wire. Alright, now we'll run it across the frame to the rear. Okay, so I've got that run along the length of the frame. So now we are right here, and this is where you can pull down this inner plastic wheel well lining, and I'm going to run it up on the inside of that. But first, I think I'm going to go ahead and tap and put in that rock light, and then have a hole for the wire to come through. That way I know the length I need and where to connect it. You just got little clips on these to pull them down. Not a whole lot to it. There's usually a lot of dirt and dust up there, so don't do it above your head or you'll regret it. This might be a two-hand thing for me. Let's see. Ooh. Yeah, there you go. But having this plastic insert's nice. It makes it a lot easier to just mount that and run the wire without it being a big deal. Alright, let's go ahead and do that real quick. I'll put you guys back on time warp. Was I took that rubber grommet to shoot one screw in and then shoot the other screw in. That way I don't have to worry about measuring and getting the exact distance. It's just I've now got the holes I need, so I can unscrew these and then drill the middle hole for the wire to go through, and then run the wires up and mount the light and connect the wires, and then tuck all this back up in there. Real quick before I move on to the next side, I'm going to go ahead and test this one to make sure it's wired up good. So now I'm just going to move on to the next side, and I don't even know if I'll bother filming it because it's exactly the same. I'm just going to run the wires along the bottom, zip tie it on top of the frame, that way it's out of the way of rocks and things, and then I'm just going to drill that in and wire it up the exact same way. Now I'm going to show you how to install a rocker switch for the rock lights. It's not too difficult. The first step is to take apart the dash, and if you don't know how to do that, you can watch my other video where I changed all the dash lights to LEDs. But once you have the dash apart, there's a blank in here that clips in the same way as the switches that you can just pop out, and then the new switch will just slide right into place. And I will link this down in the description of the video. So with the rocker switch in place, if you ran the wires the same way I did, you're going to have to run those up through the back of the dash now. Alright, there's a little spot straight down that you can barely fit the wires through. So that was the quickest and easiest way. Can't really see much, but I fed it right up through there. So now all I gotta do is connect the wires. Okay guys, so it took me a minute to figure this out, but this is gonna be pretty important for you if you get the same lights and wiring harness and the same switch to power your lights. I had an issue where when it was plugged in, this indicator light was staying on constantly no matter what position the light switch was in, or the rocker switch was in. And now I've got it fixed to where when I turn it on, the indicator light comes on, and when I turn it off, it goes off. The issue was fairly simple, but I don't know why it was set up this way. Basically, the red wire here was in the center, and the white wire was on the left, and I actually kind of broke my clip swapping them around, but it's not that big of a deal. Essentially, I thought the red was going to be power, and the white would be accessory, which it should have been, but it was actually swapped on this. So the easiest thing for you guys to do is when you are connecting this switch to the wiring harness, just connect the white wire from the switch to the red wire on the harness, and connect the red wire from the switch to the white wire on the harness. And yeah, you'd think it'd be as easy as following the colors, but it's not. And that'll give you the power where you need it, and then the connection will be correct when you flip it on. I had to take the switch apart. I was looking at the little circuit board in there. I brought up my voltmeter and I had to follow it for a second, and I got it all figured out, but it was just a pain. And now I've got it set up to where turn the switch on and the rock lights come on, and then when you turn it off, the rock lights go off. So yeah, wasn't too complicated, and the switch and everything's pretty nice and simple, but it just, the wires were backwards on this compared to what they are in the harness. So that's a quick note for you guys, so you don't have to suffer like I did figuring it out. So really, the last thing for me to do now is to permanently connect the wires to the battery, and I had just been sticking them in there so I could test it as I hooked up each light. So now I'm going to do that. You guys can do the same, and then I just have to put my dash back together, and it'll be a pretty good little setup. I'm excited. I may switch my rock lights out to just white colored in the future, but I'm going to try out blue and see how they work. Alright guys, here's a quick look of the rock lights. It's not totally dark out yet, but it's dark enough you can get a good idea how it looks. So, I think that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Again, as always, if you've got any suggestions, please drop them in the comments. Let me know what you like or want to see, and I'll try and make it happen. So, here we are. Just another upgrade for the TJ.